Hi friends, it's Ryan. Thanks so much for joining me for today's daily devotional. Today I want to talk about a weird concept. I want to talk about the concept of utility. In our world, we are largely defined by the things that we do. Have you ever felt like that? Studies have shown that when two people meet each other for the first time, one of the very first questions they ask is, what do you do for a living? We are in large part defined by what we do in the world, whether it's useful or whether it's not useful. But that's not the way that God thinks about us. One of the reasons that I like being a children's minister, one of the reasons I love working with children, has to do with a passage in Mark 10. Jesus and the disciples are walking on the road and they get close to the town of Jericho. The people of Jericho have heard about Jesus and the amazing things that Jesus is doing and saying, and so a large crowd rushes out from the city to meet Jesus on the road. And they bring along with them their children. Naturally, the children are faster than most of the adults, so they're running out ahead of the big group. And the disciples see them coming, and they know that the adults really need to hear what Jesus has to say, so they stop the kids before they can get to Jesus. And then Jesus says, "Let the little children come to me." But then he says something even more profound. "I tell you, in order to enter the kingdom of God, you must become like one of these." In order to enter the kingdom of God, we have to become like children. Scholars have debated in better and worse ways for generations on what exactly Jesus meant by that. I don't have a very defined answer. But one of the things that I can say is that children have no utility in our world. The work that children do is not valued by the systems of our world. In fact, children are usually only valued insofar as they are becoming adults. Our entire educational system, our entire employment system is predicated on the idea that children will grow up. So we need to teach children what to do in order to be useful in the world. But that's not the way that Jesus thinks about that. That's not the way that God thinks about this issue. Jesus looks at the kids and then says to the adults, you have to become like these kids. What that says to me is that our worth is not defined by what we do. You are not your utility. You are not the things that you produce. God values you because of who you are. In the times that we live in, this is especially valuable when we think about the way that race relations have played out in America, and especially in the last couple of months. We, in the news media, sometimes tend to look at black men who are killed and say, what was he doing? Who had he hurt before? Was he a bad guy? And in some of those ways, we're trying to justify the murder of some of these people. But God does not define worth by utility. It doesn't matter what a person has done. It doesn't matter what a person can do. It matters who a person is. And we know that when God created everything, when God created us, when God created each one of us, God looked at each of us and said, you are good. So I say that to you today. God looks at you and says, you are good. You are not your utility. You are not the things that you produce. You are worthy just the way you are. And so are other people. We should not be looking to other people and looking for their utility to figure out if we should help them. We should not be looking to other people and seeing what they produce in order to know if they are worth protecting. If we are not our utility, then they are not their utility either. God calls each one of us beloved. God calls each one of us son or daughter or child. God looks at each one of us and says, we have to become like children in order to enter the kingdom of God. And in part, that means God looks at us and says, you are worthy just the way I created you. My challenge to you today, friends, is to figure out how you can say that to people that you don't get along with, people that you don't agree with, people who look different from you, people who act different from you? Can you see past their usefulness, their utility, to the person that God has created and says is good?